Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of The Archive, where we strive to tell interesting LARP stories and preserve LARP history. I am St. Godric, and with me today, I have Marquise, Sir, Flo Bojan, Thunderhammer. Did I get that part right?
You did, yeah.
Boom, boom. And a Crown Knight out of the Kingdom of Winter's Edge. How you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, Godric?
I'm doing very well. I'm glad to have you on. I remember, man, what was that? 8 weeks ago that I came on, 12 weeks ago maybe, came and did an interview with you guys, and I was nervous, believe it or not, coming onto that show. It was like, oh man, I get to be on a podcast with these guys, so I'm real happy to be able to have you come back on and be a part of this one.
Has it been 12 weeks? It feels like years, Godric.
It was, I want to say it was sometime in the summer.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, we had you on for our Serpent Belt, I remember. And if you haven't saw that, everyone should go check it out. Really fun interview. We talked about some really fun things there too.
Yeah, for sure. And I have mentioned the WAC podcast a few times on this show. If you're watching this, make sure you hit subscribe to this channel, pause it, and then go and check out the WAC. What's the official name? The WAC podcast? Is that how people can find you?
Yeah, it depends on what you're looking us up on. It is just WAC Podcast, WAK exclamation point podcast.
Perfect. Go check those guys out. Subscribe to them. Come back, finish watching this video. It is a very interesting podcast where they go and they talk. What's the theme? Talk about interesting people from all around the foam fighting world. And this past one in particular, I thought was real fun too, because you guys interviewed a DAG player, which is one of the games that I play. And I love seeing Amtgarders interact with the other cross gaming stuff. So go check that one out. I really enjoyed that one. It was fun. So Sir Flo, start off with the easy softball question. Get everyone talking, get loosened up a little bit. Before you got into Amtgard, anything nerdy in your life? Any D&D, any other hobbies, anything LARP adjacent that was kind of a leading point into the hobby?
I thought that we were going to start off with the how much does a polar bear weigh question. So yes, I did the pretty normal path for high schoolers around my age at that time. Their 3.5 edition D&D was, third edition, not 3.5, third edition D&D was coming out at the time. And a lot of the really great pre-made modules, the Sunless Citadel, and some of the things that have gone on to be real hard hitters in the pre-made module world, if there's such a thing as hard hitters in that. Me and all of my friends got into it. I didn't grow up reading fantasy books. I am dyslexic, and so I have a fairly severe reading problem. I end up doing a lot of text-to-speech and stuff like that for my reading, and so there wasn't a lot of that around when I was growing up. D&D was one of my first ventures into reading, because there wasn't another choice. Reading something and going through all of these rules. And just kind of having to read it all out loud and having friends, help me through parts of it. And we go from that into a lot of other super geek culture things. Audiobooks are starting to come out at this time. And so I'm getting into those and getting exposed to the larger fantasy world. I flat out grew up in the best time for fantasy movies that has ever existed. The 80s and early 90s saw some of the most amazing, weird fantasy and sci-fi fantasy movies that ever came out. You had everything from Legend in 1986 and all the way up through. I'll even include Ghostbusters in this because
that's what I was about to say.
But magic, right? And so I had always been fascinated with the fantasy genre. It had always been one of my favorite genres. And finally finding a place that I could live it out on the tabletop was just a really, really cool experience for me. Several of my friends also found a lot of in-person LARP stuff like Vampire the Masquerade and things like that at our local gaming shop. Because of course, when we got into tabletopping, the next logical progression was going to the gaming store and meeting all of the experts that were there. And from there getting into Diablo, because they had all of the computers set up where you could chain Diablo. And
pre-internet, everybody, pre-internet.
It was. You used to, people would get computers and bring them into the same room. We called them LAN parties back then. But yeah, it was a really amazing experience for me, because this was, if I'm being honest with myself, kind of an extension of the high school culture, the good parts of the high school culture. But I didn't have to deal with all of the really crappy parts of the high school culture that came with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of really positive figures, older people, men and women that were around the Knoxville scene at that point that were super, super positive, super cool people, did things like organize, holiday parties for people that had families that maybe, weren't around or didn't associate with them or something like that, and did charity drives and children's toy drives and stuff like that. So I am super fortunate that I grew up in an environment with a lot of people that were pushing a lot of very positive things that were also linked to the geek culture things that I was getting into.
Yeah, for sure. And you talk about the charity drive. Before we went on air, you were talking about something that the WAC crew is going to be partaking in here pretty soon. You want to take a moment and plug that?
Yeah, so I will, and I wish that I could give you a better plug for it. But we are going to be doing a charity fundraiser for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. We're still working out all the details on it. We are going to be posting those on one of our upcoming WAC episodes, but that's definitely going to be something that we do. There's a lot of other groups in Amtgard, and I'm sure in other parts of the foam fighting world too, that do stuff like this. I was involved with Kingdom of Kodiak. Last year, they did a big charity fundraiser for St. Jude's Children's Hospital that was Raise Money, Shave Beards. We're not sure what ours is going to be yet, but we are getting all of that worked out, and hopefully we'll have all of the details up for that here in a week or two.
I like a Pia Warlord. I think that's always fun. You got a couple in your park that could maybe participate with you.
Yeah, right. People would pay hundreds of dollars to buy some of them. For sure.
Only time they'll ever get to actually hit a Warlord too. So, they generally won't be able to land a shot. The Pie you can though. You paid them $100, they'll sit still for you. So, question for you: you're talking about going to into the card shop. Which of the dreaded paths, if either, did you take? Did you go down the magic path or the 40K path?
So this is funny. I went down neither of them at the time.
Okay.
For different reasons. One, I really loved Magic the Gathering. I loved the structure and organization of it, and I loved the ability to pull off really cool combos. I would very much have been a Timmy if I was playing Magic, but the reading problem caused problems, right? I mean, I don't want to make it out like I can't read anything. It's that I can't read it very quickly, and for people that play Magic now, they might say, well, Flo, this doesn't make any sense. All that says is +1/+1. But I played at a time where card text was this thick and done in 6-point font because they had to add so much on there. And really all they were trying to say is, this card has banding. But they didn't say that. And I wasn't allowed to write on the card, because that was my go-to, is I would just write banding. But then my cards couldn't be played in tournaments and stuff like that. So couldn't really do that. We didn't have a thriving 40K community at the gaming shop that I went to. The round table, which was, I don't remember what it was called before then. We had one before then. But the round table, either they played on a night that me and my buddies were just never there, or we just didn't have a really big 40K community at that time. So I would see people doing miniatures games down there, and they looked okay, but it never really called out to me. I went a different direction. I got in and went really big into the creation side of Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. I wanted to DM. Not a lot of people, like all of my friends, wanted to play. Playing was okay, but I wanted to be able to craft really cool stories and do fun things for people. And we did a lot of theater of the mind play then, where there wasn't a lot of miniatures involved or things like that, but we would have a lot of practical effects. So I actually made healing potions and set them on the table.
Cool.
and your healing potion, if you drank your healing potion, then that was your character drinking your healing potion. And it was Kool-Aid or something like that. And, your rations that you had with you were actual snacks on the table, and you could get hungry and eat them. That's normally what people would do. But those were the types of things that I really liked doing. If we were going to be in the woods fighting, wood elves or something like that, then I would say, hey guys, let's meet at the park and let's play out there so that there's birds around us and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now later, yes, 40K. More the mythos than the miniatures themselves, though I do enjoy painting. I'm also really bad at it. But I love the world of 40K very, very much.
40K was hard for me when I was first getting into it because I'm so used to having a good guy. Like, I always want to root for the good guy. And people had always told me there is no good guy in 40K. Just get used to that. And I'm like, nah, there's got to be one, And like the closest thing I could find to the salamanders who kill everybody as mercy, but they still kill everybody. You know what I mean? And it's like, what? Well,
and the kind of cool thing about it too is there are very few people that are true bad guys in the setting. When at the time that we're talking about here, when we were younger, there were definitely people that were just bad guys. But as the story has been fleshed out over the years, you're finding out that, I don't want to talk about 40K too much because I feel like we'll just get this taken down. But you're finding out that some of your favorite characters that were the iconic bad guys, Magnus the Red, wasn't really a bad guy all along. Like, he made some bad choices, but really this was a situation where it was consequences of multiple people's actions coming together. And it's one of the things that I like about Games Workshop is they have a very tight control over their IP. And so they are very good about working in story over time that makes sense, as compared to something like Star Wars, where there were Star Wars books that came out and you think, is this going to be another Twins book, which is amazing? Or is this going to be another book where Luke, I don't know, holds the orbit of a planet with the power of the Force for a year or something? Come on,
and then you get a book 3 years later that just overrides that one because the newest author is the most canon author type of thing, And I love Star Wars. My whole office at work is decorated in Star Wars, so I say that lovingly. But it's whichever is the most current is the one that's going to be the most canon. So
yeah, exactly.
How did all of that then lead to Amtgard? And was Amtgard first LARP? I know you said a little bit of the Vampire the Masquerade. What was that transition like?
So we did a lot of parlor LARPs, and I hated them. I had a lot of friends that really loved them, but I didn't. I'm going to cover this. I'm going to cover this again at some point today, I'm sure too, but I'm going to drop a big secret that's not really a secret here. I don't really like LARPing in the, we are actually live action playing our characters, which is odd because, are you wanting to join too, Kat? Here you go.
There we go. We are definitely pet friendly on this podcast, so feel free and be a part of it. All they want.
It's odd because I love tabletop gaming and I'm definitely in character and doing the voices for all of the characters and really getting into it. But it has, as a 6'4" gentleman, often taller than a lot of people that I was around, socially trained. Any of the tall people in the audience here are going to vibe with this. You kind of get socially trained to do things like hunch and make yourself look more inviting and things. And that's really not what LARPing is all about. LARPing is, putting your hands down and I am Sir Flown, you fear the day and there's a mental disconnect there that's no one else's fault that makes it hard for me to go in and do stuff like that, even if it's meant to be super silly and fun. I'm doing all of this gaming stuff, and I am unaware that any kind of combat LARP exists. I think that things like Vampire and some of the other parlor LARPs that we're running like that is all there is. I don't hate them. My friends have fun when we go. I have a lot of fun. I end up playing characters that are meant to be more quiet plotty, schemy characters. Then I get into college. And my first day of college, there is a group of people out in our common area that are hitting each other with foam bats. And I'll never forget this. One of the people that I had went to high school with, because I stop and look, one of the people I went to high school with is walking by and says, hey man, what's up? I say, no, I was just looking at these guys hitting each other with foam bats. And he pauses and he has this really concerned look on his face, and he says, this is a chance where you can reinvent yourself. You can be anyone you want to be. You don't have to you don't have to keep carrying on some of those things that might get you made fun of or something like that. And I said, hey, I really appreciate that. I'm also tall and well able to defend myself at this point, but thanks for the sentiment. And I walked over, and that was how I got into Amtgard. I met someone who ran a group called the Shire of the Sleeping Dragon, which was a splinter group here in Knoxville. Knoxville became very famous for having like 30 different splinter groups, and I'm only slightly exaggerating there. We had a lot. But the people that were out there were mostly good people, funny to hang out with. The culture was really what kind of dragged me in. And I heard that I was told on my very first day, I was given a sheet of paper that had everyone's telephone number on it. Paper, for any of the kids listening, is where we used to cut down trees. We would write things on trees and use that to communicate.
Pre-Facebook groups, everybody. Yeah. Probably pre-Yahoo groups, if I had to.
We were right on Yahoo groups were a thing. There was very base functionality with them. They were basically an email client at that point. And I remember one of our first days out where I'd actually joined the group. They were talking about the fact that they were going to be adding a message board like feature where you could get ask a question, get instant feedback, and that was a big deal for us. I'm dating myself really badly here.
I like it.
But I get told that there's another group in Knoxville. I get told where they fight on the day. I decided to go out there. This group was much more role play focused. So you would set up a quest. There was only maybe 4 or 5 of us. You'd set up a quest, and the quest would be go kill the goblin. And the goblin, this was V6. And so it was the rules for the actual V6 goblin. You could look it up ahead of time. The person who ran it was good at running things like this. They would sit down and explain what the goblin is. And it was kind of like you were getting a Pokedex entry, Amtgard goblin. Goblins are weak to fire.
Monster of the week type stuff.
Yeah, very much a Scooby-Doo episode sort of thing. And the other group I was told is more fighting focused. So if you want to learn to be a good fighter, you can go over there. That's not something that you're really going to pick up here. So I started visiting the other group, which was called Mystic Glade. And Mystic Glade, I found out, had been started in 1996 when Snicker and Calidor came from Dragonspine. They were under Dragonspine. I didn't know what a Dragonspine was, but it sounded cool.
Don't you miss the time where you had no idea what interkingdom politics was? No idea really what kingdom, I wish I could go back and discover the game again. It's like, I wish I could go back and read Harry Potter for the first time. That moment of just how much fun we had learning. Oh my gosh, what you can hit someone in the sword side hip. How do you do that? And worlds open,
So this is where I think that when you hear, I'll call us Old Guard at this point. When you hear the Old Guard talk about living through the new people coming in, this is really what we mean, is getting to see that same excitement that we felt in the, all of the good things that come with we have a kingdom. Well, what's a kingdom? Nowadays, because of the way that the contracting works, it's much more smooth now than it used to be when you had to physically mail off one, and Curse got it in the mail, and Curse had to look over everything and give a stamp and send half of it back to you and half of it over here, and some of it went into, I don't know, the lockbox at the bank or however they did it. And the kingdom, your kingdom was a magical thing back then. Now you start and, you meet the king on the first day. And not to say that that's not magical, but there's a lot of mystique that can be built up and an awe that can be built up in this thing that at the time was just unachievable. We'd never be able to go visit Kingdom. That would be crazy for us to meet the king of a land. I would have definitely been one of those kids that was going up to whomever the monarch was at the time and going, I am Page Flo of the lands of so-and-so. That would have been me. Absolutely. I would have been kicked off site very quickly. But yeah, so I go out to Mystic Glade. I meet the people out there. I get invited to a fighter practice that they have, which is in a surrounding county here, Murfreesboro. I don't remember exactly where. Murfreesboro isn't right. I don't remember where it was, but we would go fight in a theater. One of the people at the park worked at a movie theater and would let us in after hours. And we would go fight in the part down at the very bottom of the movie theater that I had always known as the Rocky Horror Picture Show pit. I don't know what they're actually called, but we would go fight down there, and I learned things like how to block. And I had a falling out with that group of people based on one of my first times going up there and fighting at the movie theater. It was normal, dumb kid stuff. It wasn't bad enough that they didn't give me a ride home or anything like that. But both of us did some dumb stuff, and I went back to the other group and I confirmed everything that they had already thought. This other group is bad and mean, and Mystic Glade which hurts people.
Which group? The stick fighty group is the group you had the falling out with, and you went back to the Larp group.
I did. Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure I'm following up here.
Yeah. So I left Mystic Glade stick fighty group and went back to Sleeping Dragon Larp group and told them they did not poison the well in any way before I went. They didn't say that these were bad people. They didn't say, oh, you'll get hurt or anything like that. But I came back and said, yeah, this was my experience. And all of them are going, yeah, all of us had experiences like that. That's why we're here. And it's tough looking back on it as an adult and thinking how simply some of these rifts could have been mended. But we were all 17, 18, 19 at the time. There was no way that any of that was going to happen. So I ended up fighting with Larp group for a while. I have a lot of fun. Back then, it was 12 credits to get a level. You only got one per week. There was basically no way in the rules at that time to get more than one. Bonus credits as they exist today weren't really a thing. Like you would go to an event and you got one extra credit. And if that event was 50 miles away or 600 miles away, you got one extra credit. And so we were super excited when we had people hitting, 5th or 6th level for the first time. And it was a big thing. This is going to be amazing. And I run into the people from Mystic Glade at Winter War 1 in the Rising Winds. And so
Kentucky, right?
Yeah, in Kentucky. Cool. Yeah. We had decided to go up to, at the time, the Duchy or Principality of Rising Winds. I don't know what they were at the time.
I think Duchy, if I recall. But again, that's before my time, so that's just hearing stories. Anyone
that's from Rising Winds, correct this in the comments or wherever. If what time or when you became a kingdom, because I think Rising Winds you weren't a kingdom yet.
It was 2002, and if I recall, I have never heard of Rising Winds going through an official principality thing. To my understanding, it was a duchy, and then they had multiple parks and they kind of became a pseudo grand duchy, but I don't think they ever had the official title of principality.
You have to remember that at this time, again, there's been a lot of structural changes to the way things are done, but at this time, I don't even know if the way that we describe principalities now existed.
Yeah. I have no idea.
Not on the scale. Like there may have been areas that did it like that. Iron Mountains may have had a group down here that they're like, oh, this is our principality and we're shepherding them to become a kingdom. But I don't know if it was a game wide thing like it is now where
Well, and something to consider here for newer players who are listening to this, it's a completely different world because the internet has connected all of these groups. The Rising Winds originally was 2 separate parks in Indianapolis that had no idea each other existed. And each of those parks were connected to a different parent kingdom. And so they ended up merging and decided what they wanted to do. But we're talking about a time where you could play this game with 10 or 15 of your friends and have no idea that someone on the other side of town is playing the same game.
You had a lot of localized rules because this is, and I'm going to present this. It's not that people were being disingenuous. It's not that people were trying to cheese the rules or play in gray areas. So wipe all of that off the table. Sure, some people did. But what really caused this is I have a legitimate question about the rules. In this hypothetical, I go to Godric and say, hey, I'm playing Barbarian and it says this. What do you think? Because I'm interpreting it like this. And Godric goes, I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
We send it off to the kingdom. We mail something asking our question and wait 6 weeks sometimes to get an answer back. And you have to think too, that there's someone opening all of this and sending back replies and hoping it doesn't get lost in rain changes or it doesn't get lost, the kingdom change. And you have now that kingdom you sent it to is actually not the kingdom anymore. Now they're a principality. Like you get all of these things that the opportunities for that question to get lost, I'm sure were huge. It was. And there's an AOL group out there where, of course, if you're playing, about the AOL group. We didn't know about that. We're a small group in the middle of Amtgard nowhere. We referred to ourselves as the black hole of Amtgard for a long time because at this time, there was no nationwide map to mark where everyone was. So we were, little old us in Knoxville, Tennessee, and the next closest group that we knew of was the very bottom of Georgia at Dragon's Keep, I think, or Dragon something or other. Everybody's a dragon something in Amtgard at this point.
Of course.
R.L. Salvatore books are coming out. Everybody's dragon something. But so falling out with the Fighty Whacker group, go back to Larpy Larp group, play around and do Larpy Larp stuff. There's some things going on at Larpy Larp group that are kind of not okay. Larpy Larp group was run by someone who was a cult leader. I don't know a more polite way to look to answer that. It's a shame how frequently that is a thing in different groups in our game, where you get one person who's that cult of personality. And what you were talking about, the good aspects of high school, where people come in, they have a family, they're hanging out for holidays, and then that person sucks everybody else into their orbit, and it can very quickly become unhealthy. Yeah, and I think part of the problem is that in this case, being as absolutely charitable as I possibly can, it might not have been that this person was necessarily trying to be the evil overlord that's trying to rule the world. It's that they had the type of cult-like personality that people just flock to, right? And so, but there's some kind of bad things that are coming out of that. I won't go into all of the detail of what those are, but they were enough that I said, I don't really want to be involved with this anymore. Yeah. It came to a head where we were headed to Winter War and we were staying in a hotel room and the police got called. And I had decided at that point that I don't know if I was okay hanging out with these people in the same capacity that I had before. And who do I run into at Winter War but the guys from Mystic Glade? So this was, at the time, Gillen, not Sir or Page or Squire or anything, just Gillen, and all of the other Sons of Ra. Calidor, who had originally come up with Snicker and Chunk, and all of the other guys, and some that were just a little bit younger than me, like 1 or 2 years younger than me. And so I say, okay, well, I need to go have a talk with these guys because there was some bad blood the last time we saw each other. We're going to be on the same side now. We're adults. We should be able to talk through this. It had been about 8 months or so. And so I go over there and say, hey, listen, I want to bury the hatchet here. I did some dumb stuff. we shouldn't have fought. You did some stuff that I had a problem with, and we talked through it like adults, and shook hands at the end of it. And then we fought and went to Winter War and lost horribly. We were playing by rating rules, so old school rating rules where the home kingdom has full lives, the invading kingdom has 1 life.
Gross. That sounds terrible. Why is that ever a thing?
Well, you have to think too that at this time you still had mass spells. So you still had situations where, Rising Winds had peekaboo casters, where you have wizards that are in circles of protection that have been put up around them, casting Doomsday. And one person is set to swipe their foot through the circle, breaking the circle at Doomsday 349. And so 350, it's going to go off. For
listeners who maybe aren't familiar with the older rules, current Amtgard circle of protection is this, 10, 20 feet, whatever circle it is now, but it's not like a physical circle. V6, V7, it was like you needed rope, you needed like
a hula hoop, you needed something.
You could build walls out of these elements, and that really was. How do you break that? You move the rope, and that circle is broken. And so these peekaboo casters would hang out, and unless you have specific hit squads to go and deal with them, they're gonna. And Doomsday, if you get it off, Doomsday 1, Doomsday 2. All the way up to 350 or whatever it was, kills everybody, like all the enemies on the map, just dead.
Yeah, anyone that you can see dies. And the way that we thought that Rising Winds was insane because they had given us the high ground. They went down into this was a park where there's a military base where they land the big helicopters over on the far right. And the park is rolling hills like most of the rest of Tennessee and Kentucky. And they had taken the lowest spot. The absolute lowest spot, huge big tree underneath there, which, I'm thinking in the back of my head, being the brilliant strategist that I was, this was my second or third week, that in like a big combat zone, it wasn't my second and third week in the game, but second or third week where I hadn't been, just 5 or 6 of us at a local park.
Yeah.
Lots of people. I'm thinking, they've chosen this so that the spell balls and the arrows won't hit them. This is brilliant. No, they had chosen it because the only way we could assault them was to get on this hill that was slanted, not so steep that you couldn't walk down it, but steep enough that they'd be able to see everyone, all of us. Their plan was to pull everyone up to Kentucky, driving 4 to 8 hours, kill everyone in a single go, and then laugh and call it done. And go move on to a battle game or something like that. Because there were still battle games and things like that that were planned to happen. Your classes had lives at this point. You had to go sign a Book of the Dead. Rising Winds actually had like an official book with your name in it. When you signed into the event, your name got put into the book. And when you died, you checked off your lives, which for us was just 1. But I fight with those guys the whole time. And we have a blast. I am doing things like retrieving arrows for them. I had made my first armor. At this time, you could have 1 point of armor just by combining 4 layers of cloth. And if you studded it, then it was worth 1. And the rules for studding back then were pretty loose and fast. It wasn't like they had to be within an inch. I randomly stuck them. I looked like someone had blown glitter. That if glitter was large, studs that had the 2 prongs that you just bend down. And so I'd taken 4 layers, not just 4 t-shirts, because some people did that, but 4 layers of cloth and actually made armor, like the burlap sack style armor, put some studs on it, and I was a warrior with armor. Instantly better than everyone else at our park. And I fought with them. I retrieved arrows. I retrieved spell balls. I learned quite a bit about how the different classes balance, because the Sons of Ra, who were kind of guiding the other force, had gotten people together and was like, okay, who are our monks? Monks back then were real witch hunters. Today, the monk class as it stands right now is near useless. But back then, you had things like Vibrating Palm, where you could go into Sanctuary and Vibrating Palm wasn't considered a weapon and just one shot kill someone. Through armor, through everything, they were done. You had a lot of other things going on that kind of specialized some of the classes. And they had set up mod squads. So this was not easy for the Rising Winds. They did end up winning, and they didn't, most of their people were still alive. But we took 3 or 4 lives from all of them before they ended up getting us. And I got back and I sat down with 2 or 3 of the other people that were in the group, and I said, well, I'm going to go talk to the person that is over the LARP group and have like a kind of a tough conversation with them about some of the things going on. Again, always trying to take everything at its most charitable and say, if it was me, I would want to know, because maybe he just doesn't understand.
Yeah.
He absolutely understood everything. He immediately became frustrated that we had confronted him, and that was the end of that. I was like, okay, dude, I'm not having this conversation with you. We all left. We started going out to Mystic Glade. This became my home very quickly. The people that I had a problem with, I no longer, we mended fences, and that became the group that I then grew up in Amtgard with. We started traveling all over the United States. We happened to go down to the closest event that we could, which was a Dragon's Rage happening at that park in the bottom of Georgia. And we met Sir Golwyn and all of the people from Falling Fire and the Kingdom of Neverwinter at that point. And that was a real springboard for us, because they said they saw a lot of talent, green talent, but talent nonetheless. The cat decided to jump off. They said, well, okay, we're going to start traveling together. And we went to Winter Wars, and we went to, what was the big event that Golden Veil ran? I don't remember the name of the Golden Veil event off the top of my head now, but Golden Veil had a really good one. And then we started going out west because the
Banner Wars.
Banner Wars was out in Texas. Okay. In Sparhawk and Logan's Kingdom, where the Just Cars were from. Tanglewood Forest. I don't remember now. Is weeks ago. So these were former rogues. Stinkfoot and Chohag and Golwyn were former rogues, and they had been known as the Florida Rogues, and they finally decided to drop that and make their own company. That company was the Triads. So the Triads get formed in 2002, and we start going out, and they're still friends with all of these people. So I'm crashing at Spin's house and hanging out with Leaf, and
so I'm gonna pause real quick, tell you a funny story about Spin. So he's one of those guys, I've never met him before this in person, had heard all the stories, heard all the legends, heard every fighter that I respect telling me this guy was an influence on them. I show up for my first SCA event, and I'm not fighting. I'm just I have a few friends that are fighting, Amtgarders who have crossed over, and I'm filming because I'm getting some videos, some content for YouTube stuff. He had one of my buddies who has started as Amtgard, but is mainly SCA now, is very quick because of his Amtgard reflexes. And they're warming up for this tournament, and Spin comes up and starts fighting him one-on-one, and then pulls him aside and says, "Hey, you're an Amtgarder, aren't you?" Yeah. He's like, "Yeah, how could you tell?" And so he started talking, and my buddy didn't know who this was. And I'm standing right next to him, fangirling a little bit because this is Spin, And then he leaves and walks off. I'm like, "Dude, do you know who that is?" And so I met Spin in the middle of Kentucky at a Candlemas, and doesn't play Amtgard very much anymore, but he was in the middle of my neck of the woods fighting in a SCA tournament. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really funny. He's definitely he is the undisputed father of our sword tech that we use now. A lot of the styling for the way that we fight, he redefined a lot of that. I don't want to make it sound like these guys were excited to see me at the time either. I was a 20-year-old nothing kid to them, right? But they were really excited to meet Zeb, to meet Gillen, and to hang out with their old friends. And I got to tag along and was able to pick up a lot. I learned a lot from a lot of who I would consider some of the greatest martial prowess that has ever played our game. And again, very, very lucky to have been able to do that. I ended up picking up a 15-passenger van, and I started traveling around to visit all of these people. We would load people up and just go. We would,
That's
hey,
awesome.
we're gonna go down to Texas for the weekend. It didn't make any sense at all. We could barely make it down there, but we would drive 8 hours straight, fight, sleep for 4 or 5 hours, fight, and then drive home 8 hours and, probably not go to work the next day. We were very young, a lot of us had throwaway sorts of jobs. And we lived that rock and roll lifestyle of just traveling around it. We were down in Florida once or twice a month, visiting all of the guys down there. Along the way, I was meeting a lot of people that weren't just good with stick, but were also very influential people in Amtgard and people that shaped my ideology and the way that I think that people should be treated and things like that. Because when we were all sitting around the fire bullshitting and passing around alcohol to people that were all definitely of age.
Of course.
We
statute of limitations, you're good now.
That's right. It was over 20 years ago. So
yeah.
it doesn't matter now. I was also listening to Michael Hammer of God talk about some problems that were going on in the Iron Mountains where he was living at that time, and listening to some people that were. You have to remember that Amtgard wasn't communicating on the type of scale. There was no AIBOD at this time. Burning Lands still controlled a lot of they controlled all of Amtgard, as a matter of fact. I think every aspect of it. And
for the listeners too, who aren't familiar with this era of Amtgard, the AIBOD and all of the kingdoms kind of having some sort of representation on the game or the board that owns our name, that owns our rule book, that decides the rules revision process. All of that is a fairly recent thing. What was 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago?
I don't even remember the exact timeline. I'm going to say sometime between 2010 and 2014. And I cannot express how important this was in the history of Amtgard. This is Magna Carta being signed.
Yeah.
Except that it wasn't all of the lords coming and saying, if you don't do this, we'll kill you. It was, I don't know all of the circumstances around it. Sir Randall would be a great one to ask that question to, because I think that he was involved in the process. But I know that the end result was that we were given authority to govern ourselves moving forward. And this was a huge step in being able to bring people together, link Amtgard across world, across kingdom.
Because before this, Burning Lands, one kingdom in Texas, the original kingdom, but one of the smaller kingdoms in the game, and now is by far the smallest, controlled everything. Whatever Burning Land said happened. And didn't matter if your kingdom was a Texas kingdom or a kingdom in Maine or Seattle or the furthest reaches away from Burning Lands, you were there. That you were stuck with whatever the Burning Lands players. And if I recall at the time, all of their monarchy was only allowed to come from one park, and then that monarchy became the board, and all you get all of these things where you had a very small group of people being in charge of a rapidly growing game, and it just did not work. And the fact that they willingly gave that up, like 2012 to 2014, whenever it was in that time, I think the only other thing that could potentially come close to that historical moment wise would be award standardization in 2007. And I still think award standardization is probably second. I think or Burning Lands giving up control to AIBOD being created was huge.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this isn't on its surface. I think that this might come across as Burning Lands was trying to control all the power and stuff like that. Just like your local park and probably the way that things work in your kingdoms and things like that too. This wasn't the dream situation that many people might think it was. This was 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 people doing all of the work for a rapidly growing nationwide organization, continuing to do it not just for 6 months or a year, but years, a decade or more. I mean, you have to think the game's been around for 30 plus years now. And this single park had to do it all. All of the board was appointed from there. All of everything was appointed from there. People that were not even playing the game actively anymore were still on and volunteering their time and services to help with this, but totally unsustainable. We are traveling around when all of this is going on, when all of these conversations are going on with people that are directly involved in all of this, with people that have been in the game since it started. And I'm picking up these bits and pieces, because just like the experiences that I had way back when I was among friends that were wanting to roll up, dwarves and elves and everything else, I love the fighting and I love the competition and the physical aspect side of it, but I find myself drifting very much towards wanting to make this more fun for everyone else. And so this is a crash course in management. I didn't think of it at the time, but that's really what it is. Amtgard wants to call it leadership and a lot of different things, and that's true, it is, but it is management by any other name. You are learning how to manage people and their expectations. And, some of the things that I am picking up from all of this is ideology like build a system and then pretend that you don't know where you'll land in that system. You don't know if you're going to be male or female. You don't know what your skin color is going to be. You don't know what your sexual orientation is going to be. Now, build a system that you think will be fair for everyone, right? This is like a double-blind test. Most people, given this criteria, are going to build the absolute most fair and balanced system that they possibly can for everyone. And we messed up. As a game, we messed up at this, not just once or twice, but multiple times, because we were run by people that, while well-intentioned, hadn't necessarily been, through HR training, hadn't been managers in the real world, hadn't been any of these other things. I'm certainly, I was not those things then, and I am not now. What we did do, though, is we learned from our mistakes, and we tried to get better every single time. So I come back and I find out that through our now growing Principality, because we've been working with the Kingdom of Neverwinter, and have formed a Principality out of the collection of parks that are starting to grow up around here. Some of which include some of the many splinter parks in Knoxville that I mentioned earlier. I find out that being in the captain's chair isn't necessarily the type of leadership that I prefer or am good at. Okay. I can do it, but it is not it's not where I'm strongest. Where I'm strongest is the back end, the organizational part of it. I take a seat as prime minister after our kingdom has someone who is a excellent prime minister. Excellent. Her name is Sam. I don't remember her in-game name. But she leaves and actually becomes a flame knight in another kingdom, and then has come back now. She's moved back and is back in our kingdom at Dragon's Hollow. And she does an excellent job. She may have done this as part of her real life studies. I learned quite a bit from her. I learned quite a bit from Shalazar. And I start down that path. I do a couple times as regent, a couple times as champion, but prime minister is really where I figure out that I can shine and I can make.
Was that at a local level or at a kingdom level?
Local level to start out with. Okay. Absolutely local level to start out with. Because you're going to make a lot of dumb mistakes, and it's better that you make those on a smaller scale.
Affect 10 people, not 100 people.
Yeah, and let the 10 people. The 10 people that were at our park would tell you, you've messed up on this too. Sometimes we give each other a hard time, but this wasn't always just saying it like, oh, you screwed up. You're a terrible person. This was like, hey man, I can see that this is something that you want to do and you like doing, and I want you to be better at it. So as your friend, I'm telling you that this part did not go well. Again, very fortunate with the group of people that I found myself around at that time. So I I take that and move into principality roles and begin helping the principality build the way that we're going to do our financing and accounting and keep records and things like that. Find out a lot of the frustrating things that a lot of other people that move into leadership find out, which is no matter how good or poor of a system that you set up, if the next person chooses just to totally ignore it, then they will. And
for sure.
Will come of it. But other people start popping up with that same mindset. People that don't necessarily want to be monarch, but they want to hold another role. We have a group of people that come through that were brilliant regents. They were wonderful. They made arts and science a big deal in our kingdom where they weren't before. And they weren't pushing it just like everyone needs to have armor on the field or something like that. They were pushing it like, hey, if you want to take up attendance at your park, make sure everyone has garb. Have garb there for your newbies. And I'm not just going to tell you this, I'm going to prove it. Here are our numbers since we started doing this. I have demonstrable evidence to show that this helps. And we go, oh yeah, that makes sense. And we make a lot of just white tabards that they don't even have bias tape on them or anything. Yeah. They just got a head hole cut in them because it's something for someone to, you have to remember that a lot of the people that come into our game are broken. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I certainly was as well. But there's not many people that join our game that were the super popular kids in high school that ate at the awesome table. Yeah. There are a lot of people that join our game that ate at the corner that played Magic the Gathering and was in band and choir, and ROTC and that group, right? And that comes with its own kind of scars and emotional baggage and things like that. That group does not breed the types of leaders that you see in movies and things like that. That's just not the type of people that come out of it. So we had to go through this process where we messed up, sometimes really bad, and sometimes on a grand scale. And it's one of the problems that I have with Amtgard nowadays is in our kingdom, this is an old, young kingdom becoming an old kingdom problem. You have this group of people that grow up as the kingdom is being built. So I'm going to use Nine Blades as an example because you guys are a new kingdom up there. I love everybody up in Nine Blades, but you are a very young kingdom. You have people that worked very hard to get that going. And what happens is as those people grow up and the kingdom begins to become older, you have this new generation cycle in. And the majority of those people leave, but 10, 20% of them stay and become your lifers. And then more people join and 10, 20% of them stay. And they want to move in and help out in these leadership roles. But they're making the same simple, dumb mistakes that you did. And oftentimes they don't want to listen to you when you tell them, hey, I made those same dumb mistakes. You shouldn't make those dumb mistakes. Because there's some things that you cannot be told. They have to be learned, unfortunately.
For sure.
But now you feel the people that are in power feel like there's something on the line. We're a kingdom now. We're not just a local park or a duchy or anything. We're a kingdom, and we can't let something fail.
We can knight people now.
Yeah, we can knight people. We can't let this fail. And so this person who comes in cannot be allowed to do it at a level that is not at least as high as whomever the last person was who's been your person that has done like 30 feasts or something like that, which I hope that everyone listening realizes once it's said out loud is an absolutely ridiculous standard to hold. There's several ways that you can help out with this. You can have them do smaller roles. I've seen some kingdoms that do shadowing roles where you have all of the exact same power as the person that's doing it. You're just learning from them as you're doing it before you take on, you have to do one shadow before you do one full term or something like that.
The Rising Winds did that for a while with their ANS judges too. And I know they do that with feast stuff, and it's the shadow stuff is a way for you to onboard and make it easier. So that way you can learn, rub shoulders with someone, do it shoulder to shoulder with them, or rub elbows, I guess, without having to do it all by yourself and have all of that responsibility. You have someone that you can learn from and bounce ideas off of and show you how to do it. I love the shadow systems.
I do too. I did them when I was coming up. I know that they can be more taxing on the person that's actually doing the position. If you're a gatecrat and you're trying to keep everything straight, and you have this greenhorn who's coming in and going, I have an idea that will work out great. Like, sorry, kid, we tried that 10 years ago for 2 years almost, and it failed every single time. We're not going to do that. Oh, but mine's a slightly different version of that idea that failed. That's hard sometimes. But the point of all of this is that you hit this weird point in a kingdom's life where there's enough old guard around that are good at what they do, and that honestly don't want to see a bad part of an event happen, that they start having a hard time letting go. And this creates a rift between the younger generation of Amtgarders. The younger generation of Amtgarders who are wanting to come up, instead of being able to do what we did and come up and be able to take on those positions and not do as well as they could have, but then learn from not doing as well as they could have and become better, are now put in a position where they're being told, you're just not good enough. And then you shadow someone and you say, well, you did okay, but I think you need to shadow again. And when does it become good enough that you can take it on your own? And so from the younger generation's perspective, this now becomes, well, there's just cabals that are running the kingdom, and there's no way that I can ever get in to do anything. And from the older generation's perspective, it becomes, well, I want someone to take this over, take my burdens from me. Except that they also hold this opinion like, well, I can't let you. I'm sorry. You'll just mess it up in some way. This was one of the hardest parts for me to deal with, because I'm very much the type of person that says, I want you to go out and do the thing. And I want to be a resource for you to help you out. If you have any questions, I'm going to tell you from the very beginning where I think all of the pitfalls that you're going to run into will be. I'm going to give you some people to go talk to that are going to be able to give you different perspectives on pitfalls, because I am by no means the end all beat all for figuring out what's wrong. And then once you've talked to all of these people who I think are kind of very closely aligned with your ideology on this. By the way, ideology is going to be our Pee-wee's Playhouse word for this episode. Then I need you to go talk to some people that will disagree with you. And the reason that you're doing that is really simple. And this is one of those things that I think people have a hard time wrapping their head around sometimes. People don't follow people. People don't care about what your views or anything else. No matter how much Facebook wants to tell you to the contrary, and all of the other social media platforms that we have that are meant to drive instant thoughtless feedback, instant thoughtless responses to things. People care about ideas, and ideas are what people are arguing about on all of those platforms. There's no such thing as loyalty to people anymore. We don't live in medieval times where people are just loyal to the crown or the state or anything like that. If your idea is good, then that is what will push you forward. This is the biggest thing that I took away from Michael and from Sir Randall and a lot of these other people that I had a lot of respect for coming up is, don't make yourself a giant. Push ideas and make your ideas as good as you possibly can. So I coach people to take any ideas that they have, whether that be I want to run for and do feast, and I actually want to be able to do it. I don't want to be mentoring under someone. I want to be able to do it on my own, but I'm new and I feel like the cabal's controlling things. Go through this situation where you refine this idea and then put the idea out there, because that's what people are going to follow. That's what people are going to respect. You can be in a position where even people that disagree with you or don't even like you can respect the work that you're doing.
Yep.
Because you've put in the time to temper this idea that you have, this thing that you want to do. And this doesn't just work in Amtgard. This is a real life sort of thing.
For sure. And it's one of those things where if your idea has merit and you have polished it enough, even someone, like you said, who can't stand you, if the idea is good and you are vocal and visible with that idea, there's a good chance someone will see it. And whether or not you necessarily get to run it or not, if the idea is good and you're pushing for it, there is a good chance you get to run it. But even if you don't, you get credibility that maybe your next idea, you still do get to run.
That's right. I do not take it personally when things that I'm very passionate about end up failing and not going through, or I'm not able to do them, or I don't get any traction on them or anything like that. People aren't monsters. They don't hate you just because the idea came from you or anything like that. At least 99 point more than that.
The vast majority of the time.
What they hate is that they didn't see the value in your idea. Maybe that's because you did not do a good job delivering, explaining to them why it was valuable. Maybe it's because they had a hard time understanding. Maybe it wasn't you, maybe it was them, sort of thing. But you've still learned something. You've learned a little bit more about what the people around you like, probably the people that are in positions of power in your kingdom, people that have been around for a while and are going to be around for a while longer. And you've learned how to craft better ideas. And I think that that's really the crux that you get. This is the crucible that you're being put through, is learning to craft better ideas.
Well, and I think it's also incredibly important to put yourself on the other side of the argument. For instance, when I was coming up in arts and science tournaments, I would rail against bad tournaments and bad judges. And they made me so upset and so mad so often. And then I started judging and I started running tournaments. And it became much more realistic. You know what I mean? I still took my ideas of what enraged me so much and ran those tournaments. And I think, and the judges who were underneath me as I was running that tournament have given me good feedback and said the tournaments were better and we're making progress and the format was better and yada, yada, yada. But there are a lot of things that I railed against that just weren't reasonable things to be mad against or mad about. And you don't realize that until you are actually doing those things. And so I think it's important not only to put your idea out there, but especially if you're pushing against another person or group in the game, you need to make sure that you understand their viewpoint, because a lot of times the things that you're arguing about just aren't valid once you do it. And you can't realize that unless you take that introspective look. It was very humbling for me. I am a very proud person. I think that my ideas are correct most of the time. And after I sat and judged a tournament or two, and then I ran one, I was like, oh man, this is okay. I still think I'm doing better, but it's not quite as easy as what I was thinking it was.
Well, and I need to go ahead and say, this is one of those things where I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but I do have to say it. This is not Game of Thrones. No one listening to this podcast is Tyrion, unless Tyrion is actually listening to this podcast, in which case, Tyrion, you can contact me at the handle down here. I'd really like to talk to you. The people that you're going up against aren't people that are plotting to kill the king and take the throne, or to kill the queen and take the throne. All of those fantasies that you have built in your head about how power in Amtgard works is a lie. It's wrong. It's not that you are lying. It's that what you were sold was a lie. The people that convinced you that this is how it works were wrong. This is just incorrect information being propagated through the ages. Here's how you fix things in Amtgard. I am, of course, boiling this down into a much more simple point than it really is in real life, because in real life you're dealing with people and personalities, and you may not like these people or something like that, but I'm going to boil it down to its most simple form. Contact the people immediately and ask them what their point is. Like, I do not understand what position you hold. Please explain to me what position that you hold. It could be that you are actually fighting for the exact same thing and are on the same side and are going about it in different ways, in which case you may have just made an ally in whatever fight or conversation or argument or good thing that you're pushing towards. And it could be that you're very much on the opposite sides, but this goes back to talking to people that are not always going to agree with you, because they could then they could start explaining what their grievances are, and you go, oh, I'd never thought about this before. This is really bad. I had never considered it from this side, and they have a lot of good points. Maybe you still disagree with them overall in the end, because even with those things that we're hypothetically saying are not great, you still think that the way that you're approaching it is the best way. But you've at least learned something. Always go to the other person, explain ask them where they are and explain where you are, and find out if you're on the same side of the fence or not. Because I think we're very tribalistic, and I think that our knee-jerk response is always, no, they're wrong, pull back to the tribe. And oftentimes that's not the case.
All right, everybody. Sorry about that. Had internet issues, of course. Seems to always be the case. But thank you for sticking with us. Back here with Sir Flo. Sir Flo, I want to ask you a question about Oldguard. You mentioned it earlier, and it's something that I hear horror stories about, but then I also, on the other hand, hear stories about how awesome it was and how pure and how amazing it was. So was Oldguard as bad as I have heard stories of? And was it as good that I have heard stories of? Where does it fall?
The answer to both of those questions is yes. People are just people. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, people are always going to be just people. And Amtgard, like every other organization, had people that were not very good people, that did not very good things, and had people that were good people that did not very good things. But that's not the majority of people. The majority of people aren't monsters. The majority of people are people that are just trying to do what they think is the best and the most fun in the moment. And sometimes those ideas conflict. So the short answer to my question on what was Oldguard like, there's always been an Oldguard, and the Oldguard was always the guard that was slightly older than you are, and they were always crotchety and playing not letting you play your music loud enough and and things like that. I grew up in an Amtgard where on the battlefield, and I'm not talking about ditching, I battle gamed a lot. You were not considered good just because of your ability to win tournaments, because tournaments weren't the only way towards getting Sword Knight. You could get your Weapon Master and your Defender, which was, you had to have 2 of the 3 to get your sword at that point. And maybe you never want to become a warlord. You just want to be a Sword Knight. Some kingdoms allowed Master Griffin. So this was honor and chivalry on the battlefield. And I've talked about it quite a few times on the on the WAC podcast, but Sir Shadow, I'm 99% sure was knighted off of Griffins originally. I think that he earned later. He may have become a warlord later or gotten other accolades later, but also one of the coolest people that I've ever known. Great Amtgarder.
You talk about the best Sword Knight, one of the best Sword Knights in the entire game for my money when it comes to influence over the game, teaching skills, pinnacle of what I want a Sword Knight to be. Not a warlord, Sir Delos.
Yeah, absolutely. Delos is a great example. He never wanted to be a warlord. He wanted to teach, and that was his goal, and he worked towards it and he got it. So you couldn't just be like, if you were good on the battlefield, if you had to be good at battle gaming. These companies that people talk about in Legend, the Green Dragons and the Justicars and the Triads and the Rogues and, the Torches, and all of these groups would go to Banner Wars and compete. And these were massive, massive company-wide battles, where you were getting a masterclass in how to play battle games and do tactics and do things like that from all of these people. Now, I've been focusing on the fighting part of it right now because that's was one of my first loves in the game. But as we mentioned earlier, that's not my only love. You also had people that were working towards what we now know as AIBOD. There were different revisions of that before that didn't have as much power. We had the Inter-Kingdom Rules Committee, where we had finally decided to come together as a game and standardize rules and answer all of these. Instead of it being like the situation that I described before, where maybe you write to your king or send off to Burning Lands to see what a rules clarification is. Now you have a board that is standardizing it everywhere. So if I go out to Iron Mountains, which for me is a 1,800 mile trip, I know that I'm going to be playing the same Amtgard. They don't have a slight rules variation from my kingdom, because that was a thing that we really had to do. You looked up what the rules variations were for the kingdom that you were going to. In this land, the way that this is interpreted, assassins have pro mag. What?
Is that also maybe the difference between the shot in motion and atomic clock stuff? I've heard that a little bit, but I'm not super familiar with that.
So there were kingdoms that played shot in motion at the time, and there were kingdoms that were atomic clock. Our kingdom was atomic clock because Falling Fire and Neverwinter were atomic clock, and the Wetlands and a lot of those other kingdoms were atomic clock as well. And the way that atomic clock worked was, if I touched you first, I won. Think of it like Obi-Wan Kenobi. As soon as I touched you with a lightsaber, you disappeared. So if I stabbed you, even if your shot would have otherwise been in time by the rules that we understand them now, I won. This promoted people that had the most fast twitch muscles to be some of your best fighters. This is straying off of the question of what was Oldguard like, though, and I want to and moving into fight theory. The bad you said, was it good or bad? Was it bad? Yes, there were some really bad parts of it. There was probably quite a bit of discrimination, especially if we were to compare it to the world that we live in now, which might not be a fair comparison, right? As much as I don't want to use this analogy, there is some credibility to saying, well, that was the time that Grandpa grew up in, right? But I think it's fair to say that there was a greater level of discrimination on all levels back then than there is now. We have been working very hard to be much more inclusive. Attitudes were worse. Amtgard was ruled by, it was a might makes right scenario. I just happen to be friends with a lot of the mighty. But I also acknowledge that there were a lot of people on the field that weren't. And not always, but sometimes they didn't get treated great. If you pissed off one of the people on the field and they said, okay, hurt that dude, then that guy got hurt. But I don't want to make this sound like that's all that there was. That probably still exists to some extent today. There was a lot of really good things that were going on too. There were people like Sir Leaf, who was one of the most honorable fighters that I had ever seen on the battlefield, and was also one of the best fighters to ever play our game, hands down. You had a lot of other knights and warlords that came together in the early aughts to start up this little thing called Sword Knight Boot Camp, where they decided to pass on the knowledge that they had gained. And the first one, we drove up to the very first, we didn't even have the 15 passenger van at this point, I don't think. We drove up to Colorado and went to this and got to learn from some of those people. And this was all positive stuff. This was some of the best times in Amtgard. The reason that Oldguard gets thrown around now, I think, is because there's been some huge changes that are going on in the game in the past 5 to 6 years. We have a new knighthood, which I don't think that what's called the Iron Mountain clause has been decided yet, which would be to put Battle Game Knight under sword or keep it as its own separate belt.
I hope it goes under sword, personally.
Oh, see, I want it to stay its own belt.
Oh yeah,
I do. Yeah. But that's been put in. We have the creation of our code of conduct going in, which it might not have been 5 or 6 years ago, but certainly in the whole span of Amtgard is a more recent thing. We have a lot of people coming out that are making reports against some of the people that have been in the game for a long time that got away with things that they shouldn't have gotten away with. The bad elements of that, of what I'll call Oldguard. But the thing to take away from here is what I started with. People are people. Good people are going to do good things and bad people are going to do bad things. This isn't even a power corrupts. This is much more of the people that were doing those things were doing them because they actually thought it was fun and funny. And the friends that they were hanging out with actually thought it was fun and funny. You know, they were getting into fights and beating each other up, but they weren't calling cops on one another. That was how they had fun. And we don't live in that game anymore. I grew up in a game where underage drinking was extremely common, and smoking pot anywhere openly
yeah,
was very, very common. If you do that nowadays, in the majority of the kingdoms that I have visited in recent years, you will at minimum be kicked off the site and probably banned from the kingdom, and possibly have the cops called on you and arrested, or have your parents arrested if you're underage when all of this is going on. People listen to all of those old war stories and go, yeah, I'm going to live that Amtgard life. We don't live in that world anymore. And be thankful that we don't. There's been a lot of quality of life improvements that have gone in. My final thing on Oldguard is this. There are plenty of great things that came out of Oldguard. Oldguard is a lot of the people that are in your kingdom that you still have a lot of respect for today. Be they fighters that have been in the game for a long time, be they serpent knights who are or have produced beautiful things, or whose work you see when another knight is getting knighted and they're presenting some of their work as a knighting gift or something like that. Be they someone that's in leadership who you may not see as much of anymore because they have kind of stepped back and are helping foster this new generation of leaders that are coming in. Base your opinion of Oldguard on that. Stop using it as a derogatory term, because it includes all of those people that are doing those wonderful things as well. And start basing it on, put this on a person-to-person basis. If someone is doing something that you know is bad, or did something that you know was bad and disagreed with, it's not bad because they were Oldguard. It's bad because they were a person that did something that you disagreed with. That's really where I'm at on it.
It's the idea of look at the actions, not necessarily that person. If they were doing these actions now, wouldn't be incorrect because they're new guard. Right? They would be incorrect because their actions are incorrect.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think that is a very good way to look at it, because I think there are a lot of good things that have come out of Oldguard that we are still enjoying and reaping the benefits of, that most of the people who use Oldguard as a pejorative don't fully understand or recognize. Like you're talking about Sword Knight Boot Camp. The code of conduct is still, depending on how about, so one of my squires just hit the 4-year mark in the game. And we had a conversation the other week with new players coming into the park are viewing him like he viewed me and some of the other older players. And he's kind of it doesn't make sense to him, right? Like that is, he goes, well, I'm still a new player. Well, not really, right? The game cycles out every few, 3 to 5 years or whatever. And so these new players are viewing you as one of the veteran players. And how you wield that presumed authority says a lot about you as a player. And so even the code of conduct is now old guard if we're really talking about it, because that was 10 years ago, right? Most players from 10 years ago, a lot of people are going to call old guard now because that's 3 generations or 2 generations of Amtgarders now that have come and gone. And I think that we are still enjoying a lot of the benefits of old guard. So let's eat the meat, spit out the bones, take the things that were great, that we love from it, that we still benefit from, while fully recognizing the faults that were there, and continue on and love our game.
Yeah. And I mean, this is another thing that is, I hate to even follow that up, because I think your comment is a great place to end on that. But I meant to, and I forgot to touch on my own belt on this, because people, while in the same breath saying, oh, the warlords used to do this and the warlords did that, will look over the fact that that people that have my belt, a crown belt, stole over the course of the game's history tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars at this point, have been arrested for forming, not arrested for forming the cult. That's not illegal, but for the activities of the cult. And I mean things where they were on watch lists from the government for. So yeah, bad things come about in all cases. And like you said, you have to judge people on who they are, not use this outdated, weird label. It's
lazy. It's a lazy label too, right? It's the same. It's an othering label. It's a way to separate out people that you don't like or don't want to. It's a lazy argument. It's old guard did this, and it's not getting into the nuance of the argument. So
yeah, well, and this is a really important thing to remember too. And this isn't just an Amtgard thing, but it's going to help you out in Amtgard quite a bit. We do not get to choose what we believe. You are either convinced of a proposition or you are not convinced of that proposition. You can be convinced for good or bad reasons, and you can stop believing something for good or bad reasons. So someone that is holding a view that is contrary to yours or taking actions that are contrary to yours, they're not a supervillain. This isn't a comic book or a cartoon or anything like that. They are a person that has been convinced, either for good or bad reasons, that this is the appropriate way to handle this situation. And the way that you change that is not by insulting them or belittling them or making them look dumb on social media platforms in front of all of their friends. The way that you change that is you convince them that they're wrong. You present argumentation and evidence to them. Civilly. And you try to take this thing that they have been convinced of for good or bad reasons and change it. This is the heart of most interactions that we have as human beings, is we're having a conversation and trying to change someone's mind on something, their opinion, their view, their whatever. And I think that people really struggle with this. I think that they struggle with the idea that that we want a villain. This is the tribalistic thing again, right? We want someone that we can rally around and hate. And people just aren't that complicated. We all know this. We know this in our hearts because we all have friends that we've had tough interactions with at different times. Friends that have disappointed us, or we have disappointed those friends or those family members because we didn't live up to our own expectations in some way. And yet we don't hold ourselves to that same standard as we do this caricature that we're trying to build up. And I don't care, and I don't have time for things like that anymore. What I care about is the game becoming a better, more welcoming, more open, more fun place for everyone to play. And those are the things that I'm going to prop up. But this is what I told my own squires. I will openly challenge ideas that you put forth if they're bad ideas. There is nothing that there's no view that I hold that cannot be changed with evidence, with good evidence, and argumentation. And I don't want people to get me wrong. People hear the word argument and they think, oh, this is a yelling and screaming match. I'm using argument much more in the way that you would use it in a debate circle or something like that. Think of it like you're talking to a best friend or a parent or something, and they're trying to tell you that they can't get online because their email's broke or something, and you're trying to explain to them that that's just not how any of this works.
Yeah. Still an argument, but
it's still an argument. But you don't have to yell and scream. So yeah, like I said, I hate to add on that entire addendum to your very beautiful ending to that, but I had thought about it. I wanted to mention it earlier, and I forgot because we had the little bit of disconnect there.
Yeah. No, I think it's good. You mentioned your squires a second ago. Tell me a little bit about your Beltline, how you run your Beltline, maybe above you and below you. I'm fascinated as a new knight how other knights run their stuff, because they're so vastly different across the game and across Beltline. So give me and the viewers a peek into Flo's Beltline. How does that operate?
They're all horrible bastards. So my knight, Sir Stinkfoot, down in Neverwinter, I got in, and this really again, a lot of people that had a very positive influence on my young life when it came to how to approach situations in this game. He said, all right, Skippy, everybody's Skippy or lad or son or hey you or whatever. Cause Pat's really bad with names. All right, Skippy, I'm going to give you this belt here, this yellow belt. You know what this means? Yes, sir. That means I'm going to be your page. That's right. What do pages do? And he said, I don't really know. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee. Again, pointing to the black hole of Amtgard. And he said, well, I'm going to give you a few hypotheticals here. Let's say I go to an event and I have a tent that needs to be set up and a car that needs to be unloaded and gear that needs to be taken to weapons checks. What do you think your job is? And I said, I hope it's not to set a tent up and unload your car. And he's like, that's right. That's why you're going to do well in this Beltline. I don't have slaves. We're friends, and I'm belting you because I think that there is a skill that I can help you forward. If at any point I think you're doing something, just because at this time he wasn't even a knight, he was just a squire. He said, if at any point I think that you're doing something just because I told you to do it, then I will kick you out of this Beltline immediately. People that I raise under my Beltline think for themselves. They evaluate situations. If they have beef, they come and talk. You don't have to come and talk immediately. If you need some time to cool off, go cool off. But we will sit down and hash this out. We're not going to have a situation where something between you and I, or something between you and somebody else that's in the Beltline, festers. We're all adults here, and we will handle ourselves. We will comport ourselves as adults. And I got into arguments with other people that were in my Beltline, and we sit down and had to work them out. And I got into arguments with Stinkfoot, and we had to sit down and work them out. And I never took anyone under me. And but Pat instilled in me a few other things about the way that a Beltline should work. Some people add and drop Beltlines like they are adding and dropping hashtags. Pat's rule, and my rule by extension, is when I offer you a belt, if you ever decide to drop it, it doesn't mean that we're enemies or anything like that. We can still be very close, but you will never be back in my Beltline.
Okay.
Not under me and not under anyone else that is belted under me. It's a that's it sort of thing. I will never remove a belt from you for inactivity or anything like that. If you need to take some time off, you go take some time off. Everybody needs some mental health time. Most people that are in the game for a very long time take breaks, sometimes long breaks, 1, 2, 3, 5 years. So Inactivity isn't a reason that your belt will ever be dropped or anything like that. Don't feel like you have to turn it in before you go. Pat never had Stinkfoot never had a problem. Some kingdoms, you can only have a number of squires equal to the number of belts that you have. This is not a hard and fast rule. It's a traditional rule. Pat was one of the people that did not follow that rule. He never had a huge number of squires, maybe only 2 or 3 of us at a time. But Pat always said, I will take on people up to the limit that I think that I can help them.
Yeah.
And often his squires had different focuses. I was actually his perma squire. He was convinced that I was never going to go anywhere or do anything. And when they made the post about me getting knighted, and they copied the post and put it down in Neverwinter, I got a call 6.5 minutes later. And he said, I don't understand. All you had to do was nothing, Skippy. Nothing. How could you mess that up? Now I have to memorize a script. So these are the things that I pass down to my squires. I don't have a limit on the number of squires that I will take, but I do not see myself taking more than 2 at any given time.
How many do you have now?
2.
2. Okay.
I have 2 squires and 1 person at arms. This was a conversation that we had when we brought Agar in. Agar is my person at arms, and my squires are not ranked above my man at arms. We don't have a ranking system in that way where like you're having to fight your way up the chain or anything like that. You are a person at arms because you're new into the belted family. You're getting to know everyone. You are deciding if this is somewhere that you are comfortable with and want to stay. We hope that you are. We want to make it that way. But the way that you learn something like that is by living it, not by looking at it from the outside, because this might be a grass is always greener situation.
If I could just get a belt, everything in Amtgard will come. My dreams will come true. Yeah,
that's right. So many times I see or hear something like that.
Yep.
We are here to help you and help further whatever your goals are in the game. So if you want to be the best leather worker that has ever existed in the game, I don't know how to do leather working. I don't know why you wanted a belt under me, but I will help hook you up with people that are really good leather workers. I've been in the game a long time, and I have a rather extensive network of connections of people that I think could help you. And that's the crux of how my Beltline works is tell us what your goals are, and then we will make an actionable plan to do it. And the actionable plan to do it is not, I want to be better at fighting. Well, okay, well, we'll have a fighter practice once a week, and then we'll have the park, and that'll make you better at fighting. Those are not actionable items. Those are 30,000 foot view goals. If this is what you want, then this is how we go about accomplishing it. We need to work on this and this and this. Let's set dates for that. Do you want to do that once a month? Do you want to do that every 2 weeks? If you need to take a month off, that's fine. Like, I'm not looking to make this a second job for you. But I can't stand sloppiness. And we are lazy by nature. Most of the population is lazy by nature. They say, "Oh, I want to learn to play guitar," or "Oh, I want to learn to weave belts," or "Oh, I want to learn to do this." But then we never actually sit down and do it. And the reason that we don't, Godric, is not because we're bad people. It's not because we're sloth or anything like that. It's because we don't hammer the goal down. We don't nail things down. Most people work so much better on a schedule.
Yeah.
Every 2 weeks, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to weave on a belt. And I'm going to do it for 4 hours this day, and I'm going to put on Netflix in the background. And that's on my calendar, and that's what I'm doing today. And if one of my friends calls and says, hey, I'm doing this, I'm going to say, cool, do you want to come over and watch Netflix while I weave a belt? Because that's on my calendar and that's what's going to happen. Those are the ways that you accomplish your tasks. You set reasonable goals, you set dates and times to do them, and then you go do them. And
you have people hold you accountable if you don't.
Absolutely.
And I'm the same way. When I do my arts and science tournaments, I schedule out for, weeks in advance. Here's the days I'm going to be doing. Here's what I'm going to be doing on each day. Personally, if I don't do that, it's not going to get done. Yeah, and my overbelt, my knight was not a serpent knight. Did not really have, he was pretty decent at a bunch of stuff, but wasn't great at any particular thing. But he kept me honest. He had those constant every couple of weeks. Hey, what are you doing? How you do? And he helped guide me into the structure that I needed to be able to achieve without necessarily teaching me the actual skills of my craft, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's quite a bit that you can learn from people that just have a focus in structural organization. Like I said, this is one of the reasons why I love Prime Minister. I got my crown belt and I've never served a single term as monarch. Not when we were a principality, not when we were a kingdom. I did run, but I did not lose the vote. I lost because I failed. I passed the Kapora test with 100% and I failed the rulebook test by one question. Oh. And I found out that we were not doing retests after I had failed it. Not that I would have performed any better, but I think that I could have probably fixed the question that I got wrong, or the one that ended up tipping me over. And this is a choose your own adventure sort of game. We're a volunteer organization. If there's something that you're really good at, go do it. No cabal excuses. No, they're just young and they're going to mess it up excuses. Those are all garbage arguments. You go, if it's important to you, you go do it. Yep. You find a way to mentor under people if you need to. You start talking to people and making connections. I realize that we do have a lot of people that are shy, that may not find it as easy to just go contact people and talk to them as others do. But if this is something that you really want to do, that is a challenge that you're going to have to overcome. Other people have had other challenges that they have had to overcome. Social anxiety is not something to be taken lightly, but there's a lot of people that have it, and you can work through this, as other people have had to work through the challenges that they have faced. Don't let yourself make excuses for yourself and then use that as a foundation for the depression that you build because you weren't able to do the things that you want. You are better than that, and you can overcome all of these silly little obstacles that you put in your own way.
And I think it's important to note the calling of knighthood, the goal of masterhood, is not necessarily inherent to every player. And that's okay. The game is not structured. How about that? Your goal in the game should be to do whatever has the most fun, that brings you the most fun, because it's a hobby and it is something that is you're supposed to be letting off steam while you're here. For whatever that aspect is of the game, go and do it, right? If your goal, I want to Paragon every class, and that's what you're going to have fun with, do it. Go for it. If you're having fun is just hanging out with your friends and fighting a game here and there and just catching up with your buddies, go do it. This idea that everyone has to strive for masterhood, but you can't quite say that you want knighthood though, because there's this social faux pas here. Like, not every player has to be a knight. Not every player has to want to be a knight, and that's okay. Don't force it if that's not what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, we have Lexi is one of the most talented artisans I have ever personally seen. I mean, I do not say this lightly when I say that some of the things that she has built could be put up in, the Knoxville Museum of Art for a display, for like a month-long rotation or something like that. She is absolutely brilliant. Is not a knight. Does not want to be a knight. will never become a knight in our game because that's not why she's doing it. This was never a keep your eye on the brass ring sort of situation for her. She was proud to be acknowledged by her peers for the work that she has put in, and that was enough for her. And I hold a lot of respect for people like that.
100%.
That wasn't my goal. I came in and wanted to. I was a Pokemon trainer that wanted to collect them all. So that's still my goal. I still want to have all currently 5 of the belts. But you should set your own goals and work towards them. And remember that you are going to fail. Your friends are going to fail. But that's not a reason to quit. You learn more through your failures than you do through your successes.
100%.
And I mean, that's an old fighting saying in Amtgard too. I want to say, I heard this from Sir Leaf the very first time, and I want to say it was a quote from Bruce Lee. I do not fear the man that has practiced 1,000 kicks once. I fear the man that has practiced one kick 1,000 times. You are at that first 100 times that they threw that probably wasn't great, but that's why they threw it 1,000 times. It was a refinement. And you can temper yourself in this same way.
For sure. So we've got just a few minutes left here. And I know I'm supposed to be interviewing you here, but I'm going to take the last few minutes of our interview and be a little selfish because my park is probably 4 to 6 weeks away now from petitioning to join your kingdom. We have yet to, the event here in a few weeks is going to be our first event that we're coming down as a park to join in October. We're going to participate. Give me, if you will, an overview of the kingdom we are about to join. Culturally, what should I be looking forward to? What should I be expecting coming forward? Give me a rundown of the fighting companies, the tournaments. Like, just what should I be looking forward to? Because
They're all insufferable
excited.
Bastards. That's just my default answer for.
I would say I'm seeing a theme here. Here.
Okay, so what is the Kingdom of Winter's Edge? Okay. We have 2 major fighting companies. There are others out there. Major fighting companies being the Triads and the Seraphim. Zodiac is another semi-large fighting company in our kingdom. Our kingdom doesn't care about fighting companies.
That's a shame.
This is something that can change at any point. All it takes is someone to pick up the torch and give the kingdom something to care about in that regard again. But so far, none of that's happened. We don't have any fighting company themed events. We don't have a battle game where you're on the side of one fighting company or not. The kingdom as a whole has an opinion about the fighting companies, like, oh, these are the Seraphim. They do a lot with battle game stuff. A lot of them are in office. They're also the largest fighting company by far. I think that they outnumber the Triads, which is my fighting company, more than 2 to 1.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then you have the Triads. They just can participate in tournaments. None of these things are true, by the way. But this is
stereotype.
Yeah, this is the stereotype that.
Well, I'll anecdotally, the only Triad I've met in person is Sir Marcosius, and he only fights in tournaments. So therefore, everything you all do is just tournaments.
Confirmation bias.
Yeah.
We are not a very politically involved kingdom. By that, I mean, we will argue and fight and yell and scream at each other online just as much as any other kingdom about odd things that will come up in our Kapora that need to be fixed, or situations where the monarchy has done something and is this finally the monarchy stepping over the line in some way. But it's not like we will also rally around our members that need some help right now or are going through something. It's most of our elections are totally uncontested, which is a sad growing aspect in all of Amtgard.
Your monarch right now is contested, though.
It is. the position of our monarch is contested. It is my squire Teflon and Oz the drunk that are running, and this is one of the first times and the last time our regent position was contested. But those two stand out.
Okay.
And that's probably not a great thing that they stand out. This has been a growing problem in Amtgard, not just our kingdom, that a lot of kingdoms are having situations where more than just one position is going totally uncontested. And I think it's because of, linking back to what we said earlier, people trying to hold on to power and new people coming in that don't feel like, the thought is that if I take the time to make all of my quals and stuff like that, I just won't win because these people won't vote for me. They're going to vote for, the other person.
Whoever's in the cabal.
Yeah. Whoever's in the cabal. We have fairly active positions. So our champion is normally the one that's doing all of our all of our battle game stuff. Our monarch is normally the one that sets the theme. We are a very theme happy kingdom. So right now we're doing a Neverland, Never Neverland theme. Before this we had done a theme that Clover had made, where he had actually recorded this really cool YouTube video with voice modulation where he would drop like hints and secrets of things that were going to be coming in battle games and stuff like that.
That's neat.
Yeah. And before that we had like Through the Wizard's Portal, Mansion of Madness, D&D style sort of funds. We have a very, very active battle gaming community. We have a very, very active Paragon community. Battle gaming is very, very big. Maybe not on your local park level, depending on your local park, but definitely at our kingdom level.
Cool. Cool. Which is funny to me, looking from the outside in currently, that I have picked up that battle gaming is a really big theme and a really big goal. Coming from the Rising Winds, where the major battle games come from company games. It's kind of a weird shift that I'm excited and I think will be fun. But for us, everything revolves around Keep and Bridge Wars. And both of those are company, and every game at every other event is like, we'll play it if we want to. But those two events are like company driven. We will battle game. Like we're already prepping for, my fighting company is already prepping, and we've got 3 or 4 pages already of notes for Bridge Wars. That's 3 months away. 2 months away, and then so coming down to a kingdom that's going to be not company focused but loves battle game is something I'm pretty excited for.
The problem that we ran into was that a lot of the negative things that were going on were associated with companies. Not all of them were deserved. Some of them were. And our answer to that wasn't a great one. It was that we just started drifting away from company-based things. And when I say us, I'm actually not talking about the Kingdom of Winter's Edge. I'm talking about Amtgard as a whole. You have seen a lot of the older fighting companies, the ones that were responsible for some of these things going on, dissolving now as they've gotten older and their members have gotten older. The ones that have survived are on the mentality is a lot different.
It's a short leash too. If your company's older than 10 years old, I feel like you're under a microscope sometimes. Like it's what we were talking about, the people who, anything old guard is bad. Like if you're a part of an old company, you better not mess up.
Yeah, that's right. So we drifted away from a lot of the company-based things, and there were some good and downsides to it. If I want to point out some things that I think are very positive, it's that it gave the ability to shine not on, St. Godric, who is a member of this fighting company and they all have the best stick, but it shifted to, wow, Godric's a great healer. Godric's a great druid. Godric's a great barbarian. And so this was a much more individualized approach. instead of looking at the tabard that you were wearing and immediately making an assessment on whether they were going to win or lose. They started looking more at, well, they have 3 paragons that are running together on their side, and we know, we need to come up with an answer for that, and how are we going to do it? And that part I really love. I love not just being a triad.
Yeah.
I love my company to death. But
I get that. I get that for sure.
I don't want to be just a company, right? I am also flow and a lot of other things on top of that. If I would say that, is there a bad thing to what happened with the companies being lost? Our companies, when they were still running very strong, organized a lot of the games and different kind of things that we were going to play. They kept a lot of resources. So we had tons of monster garb floating around because the companies would make all of it and then use it over and over again and in different things. All of that kind of went away once the companies became less involved with that aspect of it. Which is sad. But again, that could be fixed at any point if someone just stepped up and did it. The fact that we made mistakes in the past does not mean that we will continue making those mistakes in the future. So
what I'm hearing is I just have to goad the triads enough to get them to come up to Bridge Wars, and then they will goad the Seraphim enough, and then you can get it going again. I
don't think that it would take much goading for the Seraphim. Most of them they cross game as well. They do a lot of Dag and Bell, and so I think anything that they see as like a cool company event, they'd be totally down for. But yeah, so we touched on not very politically involved, not in a good way, not in a bad way, just a lot of people don't care. The company situation is that we have companies that are here. There are, of course, preformed opinions of how those companies are and how all of the people in them are. Most of them are wrong. But it's not a negative view of companies overall, and it's not a positive view. It's become the fact that company things don't happen anymore means that it's become an unknown or neutral sort of view.
What's the difference between company and household then? If
that's a great question.
Okay.
I would say that households in Winter's Edge are essentially meaningless right now. Not anyone from Winter's Edge that may be listening to this, I am not saying that your household is meaningless. I'm saying that the kingdom's view on households is totally inconsequential to to the inner workings of the kingdom or the things that get done. So what I mean by that, Godric, is we are not one of the kingdoms where house so-and-so sponsors breakfast.
I gotcha.
And so-and-so fighting company is cooking dinner for everyone and things like that. That's not really where we're at. We do occasionally take bids at our events for different things that are going on. And it could be that all of the Thunderhammers are going to be doing lunch. But there isn't this push or kingdom-wide recognition of what households do. There has been in the past. But what happened was they were just too successful for their own good. So we had the Green Lanterns that were started. And they kept growing and growing. And then the Green Lanterns were doing every single event. And they were, because anyone that wanted to join got underneath there because that's where all of the experienced people were that were helping push newer people up in the ranks. And then they became the secret cabal. And then all of this backlash started where it's I'll never be able to get in and do anything unless I'm a Green Lantern. So they started stepping back and saying, well, if that's how you guys feel, we'll just step back. In the void that was left by that, a lot of the Seraphim stepped up and started doing things. And then they got better and better, and their membership started growing because they weren't just a fighting company, but they were a household fighting company. Not that they would label themselves that way, but in terms of the role that they were fulfilling in the kingdom. And then they became the secret cabal, who was always doing everything because the people that wanted to do things like that were attracted to that group, and that group helped them. I would love to see more households come back. I would love to see more households do things. I would love to see the fighting companies doing things again. I think it's healthy to have a lot of fighting companies. But we've had we've had a real hard time with groups doing something and then everyone kind of flocking over to them instead of saying, well, they're pretty cool, but I'm going to do my own thing over here with my buds.
I gotcha. It's the let's let the big dogs scalp, and no one really grassroots it to challenge the big dogs.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
We have a lot of artisans. We have a lot of fun, funny and interesting people in our kingdom. We have a lot of. I didn't realize this until I had started doing some traveling again. After quite a long break from traveling, we have a lot of old Amtgarders in our kingdom.
Mm-hmm. I've noticed that too. I've wiki stalked quite a few people as we're coming in. I'm trying to do my research because we're joining the kingdom, and I'm trying to get as much, or we're going to try to join the kingdom, and I'm trying to get as much info. And I've wiki stalked every name I can find that is tied to your kingdom through your kingdom wiki page. And I'm like, man, there's so many of these players that are still active that have been playing for a long time. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just at our park, just at Radiant Valley alone, Radiant Valley is old Mystic Glade. It's all the same players. Radiant Valley was another park that formed. We ended up combining, and we kept the Radiant Valley name. I think the average length of time that our players have been playing is 10 or 11 plus years.
That's crazy.
And that's only because we have 12-ish players that have been playing for 20 plus years, and we have 15 or 16 players now that are less than a summer in or less than a year in. And it's balancing out in that way.
Yeah. So one of the things through my wiki stalking that I found, I want to get your opinion on. So I'm coming from Kingdom of the Rising Winds, founded in 2002, has knighted 50, 60 people at this point. When I left the circle, there were probably 25-ish active knights. Looking at the orc, pre-COVID, y'all had like 15, I think, total knightings, with like a dozen of those still being active. That seems really low to me. Am I missing something? Is there something else going on?
So Winter's Edge is an odd place in Amtgard. We were under Neverwinter. Neverwinter
for a while, correct? Like it was
almost 20 years.
Okay.
We were under Neverwinter for, I'm sorry, not 20. I think 16 and a half or 17 years. We're either the longest principality that's ever served, or we're only slightly eclipsed by another group. But there was a lot of procedural questions that came up while we were underneath that, because Neverwinter did not want to knight anyone from our group. Not because they didn't think we didn't deserve it, but because their thought is, you should be working towards kingdom. You should be checking all your boxes to get kingdom so you can start knighting your own people.
I gotcha.
If we just start knighting every single person up there that deserves it, why would you ever leave? You literally have every power at that point.
Okay.
And not all of their monarchs were like that. We did have some people that got knighted. Sir Kazan was knighted by the King of Neverwinter when we were still under Neverwinter. So it's not like it never happened. Sir Shalazar was knighted while we were still, I think we were still under Neverwinter at that time. We definitely were. So it's not that it never happened. It's that it was an exceptional circumstance for it to happen. This meant that we ended up in a situation where we got kingdom and we had a backlog of people that needed to be knighted. We also had some people that had transplanted here. So Sir Lorik, the very first person that we ever knighted at Keep on the Borderlands, because Delos was going to be there, who is his knight, came in to us. He was originally from the Texas area and had moved up here and was already almost a master artisan by the time that he got here.
Great whack episode. If you haven't, go check that one out. I remember that one pretty vividly because of Delos, and I, fanboy over Delos, but then moving up here and becoming the transplant who was the first knight. And I just thought that was a cool story.
Yeah. a lot of our nights were serpent nights to start with. But here's where the big problem comes in. We have 4 events a year. We are knighting someone at almost every single event since we get, from the time that we get Kingdom until suddenly everything in the state of Tennessee gets shut down.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to do any kind of events or anything like that. And we have more people that are qualifying to be a knight. Now we're stuck in a situation where we have probably 5 or 6 people that are active people in the game right now that should be knighted. We can't do anything because we come and we ask them, hey, do you want to do a virtual knighting? And they go, no, I want my friends there with me. Yeah. And we go, hey, I get that.
For sure.
That's really what you're seeing here. A lot of the knights that you see are knights that have transplanted from other areas. Homegrown, like not necessarily people that our kingdom have knighted, but people that have been here for a very long time, are a lot of those old players I was mentioning. Sir Darko from Radiant Valley, Sir Gillen from Radiant Valley, me from Radiant Valley, Sir Kazan from down in White Oak in Georgia. These are, I'm sure that I'm forgetting some, and the knights are going to watch this and go, I can't believe you didn't say my name. But I would say that we actually have on our circle about 8 or so people that are super active. I'm sorry. Marcus the Mad and Wheelock from Dragonspine originally. Been in the game a very long time. Very, very senior knights, I believe, is how veteran knights, I think, is how they like to be referred to. And then we have a whole lot of people that are on the circle but aren't active anymore. Usually, like some of these people have been in the game for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And it's just that we're going through a period of time where they're in their break phase, right? So yeah, if we could, we would probably have another 6 or 7 people that were on there. It's reached a point where the monarchy has said, anyone want to do double knighting ceremonies, like 2 knightings at a single event, not just at the same time? And people go, no, I would rather have my knighting ceremony. And they go, okay, well, we'll start working through the list.
No, I get you for sure. One of the things I was most excited for is, so Kingdom of the Rising Winds in 20 years of history have like 3 or 4 Master Owls and only 3 Master Garbers. And then the rest of us are dragons. And then I'm looking through yours and y'all have 3 or 4 Master Garbers. And that's pretty cool. Like I'm pretty excited to see the work and the level of the garb on the field and just the average player, because when you have that many good Garbers, everyone else is going to be aspiring towards it. And so Master Garbers, from where I've played for 10 years, are very few and far between. And the ones that we have some of them aren't active anymore. And so I'm very excited to see the garb from some of these people when I can make my way out there.
Oh yeah. You have people on the field that have a lot of well done applique, not gaudy, but well done. Right. And are using high quality materials, high quality linen that they're hand dyeing. And, it is, for anyone that comes and visits Winter's Edge, I'm not going to say that we don't have the kid that's wearing like a basketball sweatband on his head and like ripped up t-shirts or something like that. But we have some people that are truly, truly gifted in, tailors and seamstresses and things like that. And it has a lot of them are people that I've been friends with for a very long time. And it was very rewarding to finally see them acknowledged by the kingdom when we got that. And that's also the reason why we had so many Serpent Knights as our first thing. Usually when a new kingdom's made, you get a lot of Crown and Flame. Crown and Flame are very close. Usually if you're high in one, you're fairly high in the other. But we definitely drifted towards our artisans first and recognizing.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
So thank you for indulging me. I've been dying to ask you that since we started talking about you coming on. I'm like, all right, I got to ask him, what should I expect? So last question for you for the evening. Is there anything on your heart, on your mind that I didn't ask that you're just dying to get out to the audience. And I know for you have the podcast, so probably not. So don't feel pressured to it. You've got avenues in which to get your opinions out. But I always like to end the show with, is there anything you wanted to chat about with me or with the audience that maybe I didn't ask?
Just kind of reiterating something that we touched on before, I think is a great place to end. The purpose of this hobby is to have fun. And there are a lot of people that pour their time and their energy and their heart and their soul into this, but we have to remember that it is a hobby in the very end. It is one that you may need to take a step back from for personal reasons. You may need to take a small break. And that when you're not taking a step back, that you can contribute. You can help out the people that are under you. My knight's knight, Sir Tarjay, was not a great person in the game. May not have been a great person in real life either. At one of the last SKBCs that I went to, he was teaching there, and he gave this speech at the very end when we're all having dinner and said that I spent most of my life being a bastard in Amtgard and stepping on people, knocking them down a foot to raise myself an inch. And what I learned through all of that is that doesn't breed a good Amtgard. At this point, Amtgard was really suffering from losing people to other games. And we were losing people to pay to play games, not even Dagger Bell, but things where they were willing to go and spend $200 to $400 on a couple of events a year, instead of coming out to our free game or only spending $25 and getting fed the whole time. That's a big problem. And so the crux of his conversation was pick people up with you. We become better as a game when you reach back down and you help the people that are under you up, and they reach back down and help the people that are under them up. Let people make mistakes. No matter how much advice and feedback you give them, they are going to make mistakes. You made those same mistakes too.
Or worse.
Let them grow the same way that you grew, and stop complaining that there's no one to replace you. The Michael Hammer of God said something a long time ago that I think is a kind of a great quote to end this on. If you do not have any young and upcoming fighters in your kingdom, that is your fault, because you have not been training the next generation.
Yep.
If you do not have people that are willing to step into the kitchen, that are willing to run gate, that are willing to autocrat, that is your fault, because you have not been fostering and promoting that growth. A lot of the problems that we have start with us, and they end with us too. We both create and can fix most of the problems that we run into in this game. And you do it by reaching out to people. You do it by saying hey to that person that maybe you've never spoken with at an event. It means more than you know to one of the new players to be said hello to by Sir Godric Squire, who we were talking about has been earlier, that's been in the game for 2 to 4 years. You don't think of it that way, but you have to remember what you felt like when you were that new player, and that experienced player that you respected and looked up to came up and said hi to you. Communication is key. Reach out to people. And I think that's all I have to say on that.
I love it. I think that is a perfect way to end the show, because every one of us who plays this game for a long time, you ask any lifer, they will be able to tell you the first person who was nice to them. They will be able to tell you the person who went out of their way to chat with them when they were that nervous, socially awkward noob that we all were. Our goal should be that person for every new player that we find. And like you said, foster. If we don't have people doing the jobs, that's not the fault of the people. That's the fault of the leadership who has not prepared them to do the job.
Agreed.
I love it. So, Sir Flo, I really appreciate you coming on. I had a good time with you here on the archive. Viewers, if you've made it all the way to the end, I appreciate you as well. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. It does help a whole lot. And head over to the Whack podcast as well. Check them out. I love their content. You guys release every Friday, correct? Awesome. Fridays. Go check those out. I love listening to them, especially to and from events. You can just kind of put it on shuffle and listen to Flo's beautiful, deep voice as you drive to the events. So everybody, we appreciate you for listening. I'm St. Godric. That's Sir Flo over there. This has been another episode of The Archive. We'll see you next time.